The Nexus Military Academy, perched on Corvex Prime like a chrome monument to bureaucratic optimism, its gleaming spires reaching toward stars that had witnessed countless species rise, fall, and occasionally explode in spectacular fashion. Today, however, the station buzzed with the particular brand of nervous energy reserved for ceremonies involving large predators and fragile egos. Commander Thylex of the Zephyrian High Command adjusted his ceremonial robes for the 15th time, his translucent wings fluttering with barely contained anxiety. The annual War Beast selection was supposed to be a straightforward affair. Bring in one of the legendary Therian predators, let it choose the most worthy cadet. Everyone goes home with their species' dignity intact. Simple, foolproof. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Academy's main hall had been transformed into something resembling a gladiatorial arena, if gladiators had access to anti-gravity platforms and energy shields. Representatives from 17 different species sat in carefully arranged hierarchical order, each delegation positioned according to their perceived military prowess and galactic influence. At the very back, almost as an afterthought, sat the newest additions to the Galactic Defense Consortium humans. Zara Volkov picked at her regulation uniform while observing the elaborate preparations with the detached interest of someone watching particularly organized chaos. Her dark hair was pulled back in a standard military knot, and her expression suggested she found the entire spectacle about as impressive as watching paint dry in zero gravity. Around her, other human cadets whispered nervously about their chances, but Zara seemed more interested in calculating how long this whole production would take. The other species, however, took the ceremony with the seriousness of a religious revival. The Sorix delegation had spent the morning performing intimidation displays, their scales shifting through aggressive color patterns while they practiced their most menacing postures. Their cadets looked like walking tanks crossed with very angry iguanas, each one convinced that pure physical dominance would obviously appeal to a war beast. The ethereal Velani floated in meditation circles, their semi-transparent forms shimmering as they attempted to project mental superiority. These beings had evolved beyond physical form on their gas giant homeworld, and they approached everything with the smug confidence of entities who considered material existence beneath them. The Chittic Hive representatives clicked and chattered in perfect synchronization, their insectoid features gleaming under the artificial lighting. They moved as one unit, demonstrating the kind of flawless coordination that came from sharing a collective consciousness. Individual thinking was so terribly inefficient, after all. Even the Gloxy had sent their finest, amphibious creatures whose skin glistened with adaptive moisture regulators. They'd practiced their swimming formations in the Academy's water tanks, apparently under the impression that a space-borne predator would be impressed by aquatic prowess. Each species had arrived with detailed psychological profiles of Therian war beasts, battle strategies, and presentations designed to showcase their natural superiority. The humans had brought coffee and a vague sense of curiosity about what this war beast thing was all about. Commander Thylex cleared his throat, a sound that emerged as a melodious chime through his species' unique vocal apparatus. "Honored cadets," he began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd given this speech before. "Today you will witness one of our oldest traditions. The Therian war beast will select its partner based on instincts honed over millennia of evolution on one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds." The beast in question was being transported in a containment unit that hummed with enough energy to power a small moon. Through the reinforced transparent walls, glimpses of something massive and predatory moved with liquid grace. The technical specifications were impressive enough: 3 meters at the shoulder, psychic capabilities that could detect emotional states from considerable distances, intelligence that rivaled most sapient species, and a bite force that could crunch through ship hulls. What the specifications didn't mention was the creature's disturbing tendency to make its own decisions about partnership compatibility, regardless of what military hierarchies might prefer. The containment unit was lowered into the center of the arena with ceremonial fanfare. The energy barriers dissolved with a cascade of sparks, and the warbeast stepped into view, If someone had asked a committee of nightmares to design the perfect predator, they might have come close to Etherian. The creature moved like liquid shadow given form, its midnight black hide seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. 6 legs carried its massive frame with surprising grace, while sensory tendrils writhed around a head that managed to look both elegant and terrifying. Eyes like molten silver swept the assembled cadets with calculating intelligence. The beast's presence hit the room like a pressure wave. Several Veilani flickered more rapidly, their meditation clearly disrupted. A few Saurix cadets took involuntary steps backward, their intimidation displays faltering. Even the perfectly synchronized Chittic showed signs of individual nervousness, a remarkable achievement in itself. Zara, meanwhile, tilted her head slightly and made a quiet observation to the cadet beside her. Big dog. The selection process began with all the pomp and circumstance that galactic bureaucracy could muster. The war beast was expected to move systematically through the assembled cadets, using its legendary instincts to identify the most worthy partner, preferably someone from a properly established military species with appropriate hierarchical credentials. It started with the Saurix delegation. As protocol demanded, the lead cadet, a particularly impressive specimen named Krexer, stepped forward and assumed what his species considered the ultimate dominance pose. Chest expanded, neck extended, scales shifting to their most aggressive patterns. He looked like a biological weapon, crossed with a very confident lizard. The war beast approached with fluid steps, its sensory tendrils extending toward the Saurix cadet. For a moment, everyone held their breath. This was at the moment when galactic military hierarchy would be validated by primal instinct. The creature sniffed once, made a sound that might charitably be described as dismissive, and moved on. Krexer stood frozen in his dominance pose, apparently unsure whether maintaining it was more or less embarrassing than abandoning it. His scales flickered through several confused color combinations before settling on a rather undignified shade of beige. The Veilani were next. Their representative, a shimmering entity calling itself Zentara, attempted to establish psychic contact with the warbeast. Ethereal energy patterns danced around both beings as the Veilani projected what it considered appropriately superior mental frequencies. The warbeast paused, its head tilting as it processed the psychic contact. Then it did something that roughly translated to a mental shrug and continued its inspection tour. Zenthara flickered rapidly through several states of existence, apparently trying to process how a primitive predator could dismiss such refined mental abilities. The other Veilani began whispering among themselves in harmonics that sounded distinctly flustered. The Chittic delegation presented their candidate with military precision. The chosen representative stepped forward, while the others formed a perfect support formation, clicking in unison to demonstrate their species' legendary coordination. They moved like a biological machine, each motion calculated and precise. The warbeast observed this display with what might have been professional interest. It circled the formation once, examining their perfect synchronization and flawless tactical positioning. Then it made a sound that any Earth creature would have recognized as the equivalent of meh and moved on to the next group. The Chittic formation wavered slightly, the first time in recorded history that their collective consciousness had experienced what humans might call a wait. What moment? Even the Gloxy's aquatic demonstration earned nothing more than a polite acknowledgement before dismissal. Their representative had performed an elaborate swimming pattern in a portable water tank, showcasing the fluid grace that made their species formidable in naval combat. The warbeast watched with the mild interest of someone observing a particularly elaborate fish tank, then continued its methodical inspection. Species after species presented their finest cadets, each certain that their particular evolutionary advantages would appeal to the predator's instincts. The results were uniformly disappointing. The warbeast examined each candidate with professional thoroughness, acknowledged their various capabilities with something approaching politeness, then moved on without a hint of real interest. By the time it reached the human section, the atmosphere in the hall had shifted from confident anticipation to confused murmuring. Command staff exchanged worried glances. This wasn't how the ceremony was supposed to proceed. The warbeast was supposed to choose someone, preferably someone whose species already had an established military reputation. The creature approached the human cadets with the same methodical precision it had shown the others. The first few humans received the same polite inspection and dismissal routine. Then it reached Zara Volkov. She was sitting casually in her chair, still picking at her uniform sleeve with the air of someone waiting for a particularly long meeting to end. When the war beast stopped in front of her, she looked up with mild curiosity. "Oh, hey there," she said, as if greeting a neighbor's unusually large pet. The war beast's entire demeanor shifted. The casual inspection became focused attention. Its sensory tendrils extended toward Zara, not with the clinical assessment it had shown others, but with something approaching recognition. The creature's massive head tilted, studying her with obvious interest. Then, in a move that sent shockwaves through the assembled military leadership, the war beast sat down directly in front of Zara's chair and looked at her with unmistakable expectation. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments when physics suddenly stops working properly. Commander Thylex's wings stopped fluttering entirely. The Sorix delegation began questioning the fundamental nature of reality. Several Velani flickered out of existence temporarily, apparently unable to process what they were witnessing. Zara, meanwhile, looked at the massive predator sitting in front of her like a particularly large dog waiting for dinner. "Well," she said conversationally, "this is unexpected." The war beast made a sound that, while not quite a purr, conveyed obvious satisfaction with its choice. It settled into a more comfortable position, clearly indicating that the selection process was complete. "There must be some mistake," Commander Thylex managed, his melodious voice hitting several notes that weren't typically found in standard Zephyrian vocal ranges. "The creature needs to complete its assessment of all candidates." The war beast turned its silver gaze toward the commander and made a sound that needed no translation. "I have made my choice." Protocol demanded verification. If the war beast had somehow malfunctioned or been influenced by unknown factors, military doctrine required investigation. The Academy's senior staff huddled in urgent consultation, while various species representatives demanded explanations for what was obviously an error in the selection process. "Perhaps," suggested the Sorix commander, his scales shifting through diplomatic color patterns, "the creature requires additional time to assess proper dominance hierarchies." Or, offered the Velani representative, its form shimmering with dignified confusion, "there may be psychic interference affecting its judgment." The Chittick delegates spoke for their collective. Consensus indicates probability of systematic error in selection protocols. Through all this discussion, Zara remained in her chair while the war beast maintained its chosen position. The creature showed no interest in the debate swirling around them, apparently content with its decision. "Look," Zara finally said, addressing the room with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to particularly slow children. "Maybe it just likes what it likes. I mean, I'm not complaining, but you all seem pretty worked up about this." This casual acceptance of the situation seemed to offend several species simultaneously. The idea that such a momentous decision could be treated with such nonchalance challenged their fundamental understanding of proper ceremonial behavior. Commander Thylex made a decision that he would later describe as diplomatically necessary and personally terrifying. They would conduct a practical assessment, a combat simulation that would either validate the war beast's choice or demonstrate the obvious error in its selection process. The simulation arena materialized around them, projecting a hostile environment filled with the kind of tactical challenges that separated competent soldiers from casualties. The scenario was designed to test coordination, strategic thinking, and combat effectiveness under pressure. "Standard engagement protocols," announced the simulation supervisor. "Multiple hostiles, varied terrain, limited resources. Demonstrate effective partnership dynamics." The other species representatives watched with barely concealed anticipation. This would finally reveal the mistake in the war beast's selection process. Combat simulations required precise coordination, tactical sophistication, and the kind of military thinking that came from proper evolutionary development. Zara stood up, stretched casually, and looked at her new partner. Alright, big guy, let's see what you've got. The simulation began with a cascade of hostile projections enemy units designed to test every aspect of military cooperation. Standard doctrine called for careful assessment, tactical planning, and coordinated response protocols. Zara took one look at the developing situation and made a decision that violated approximately 17 different military procedures she improvised. Instead of establishing defensive positions, she moved unpredictably through the terrain, using environmental features in ways that battlefield manuals specifically advised against. Rather than following established engagement patterns, she adapted her approach based on immediate circumstances. The war beast responded to her unconventional tactics with obvious enthusiasm. Where other partnerships had attempted to impose predefined strategies on the creature, Zara simply adapted to its natural hunting instincts while finding ways to complement its approach. When the war beast flanked left, she covered the right approach without needing to discuss it. When she spotted a tactical opportunity, the creature was already moving to exploit it. Their coordination wasn't the product of training or protocol, it was the result of two adaptive intelligences, recognizing compatible approaches to problem solving. The hostile projections, designed to challenge conventional military thinking, found themselves facing something entirely different, a partnership that refused to behave predictably. Every time the simulation's tactical algorithms adapted to counter their strategy, Zara and the war beast had already moved on to something else. The other cadets watched in growing amazement as the human war beast team methodically dismantled challenges that were supposed to require sophisticated military cooperation. Zara's approach seemed almost casual, but it was brutally effective. "How is she doing that?" whispered a Sorix observer, his scales shifting through puzzled color combinations. "Her tactical approach appears random," noted a Chidic representative, yet achieves optimal results through chaos adaptation protocols. The Vailani delegation flickered in confusion. Her mental patterns show no evidence of strategic planning, yet her effectiveness exceeds calculated parameters. When the simulation ended, Zara and the war beast stood surrounded by the projected remains of their defeated opponents. The creature looked pleased with itself, while Zara seemed mildly surprised by all the attention their performance was receiving. "Not bad," she said, giving the war beast what was unmistakably an approving pat on its massive shoulder. "We make a decent team." The war beast made a sound that conveyed obvious agreement and satisfaction. In the stunned silence that followed, Admiral Corvus of the Academy Strategic Command requested an immediate private consultation with the xenobiology specialists. What emerged from that discussion would reshape galactic understanding of both war beast psychology and human military potential. Dr. Melina, the Academy's senior xenobiologist, addressed the assembled command staff with the careful precision of someone delivering news that would upset established assumptions. "The war beast selection process isn't based on demonstrations of dominance or tactical sophistication," she explained. "These creatures evolved as apex predators on a world where survival required constant adaptation to unpredictable threats." She gestured toward where Zara was casually scratching behind the war beast's sensory tendrils, apparently unaware that she was handling one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators like a friendly neighborhood cat. War beasts don't choose partners based on strength or intelligence displays. They recognize pack alpha potential, the ability to make survival decisions under chaotic conditions. Most military species evolved for specialized environmental niches. Their tactical thinking reflects that specialization. The implications hit the room like a tactical revelation. Every other species had approached the selection by demonstrating their particular evolutionary advantages, exactly the kind of specialized thinking that war beasts were programmed by evolution to ignore. Humans, Dr. Melina continued, evolved as persistence hunters on a world with unstable climate patterns. Their entire evolutionary strategy is based on adaptability and improvisation. They don't have specialized advantages, they have the ability to develop whatever advantages a situation requires. Admiral Corvus studied the continuing interaction between Zara and her chosen partner, The creature was displaying body language that xenobiologists had rarely observed, the relaxed posture of a predator that had found its ideal pack leader. The war beast recognized something in her approach that matched its own survival instincts, the Admiral realized. Not specialized superiority, but adaptive flexibility. Commander Thylex's wings resumed their nervous fluttering. Are you suggesting that human military thinking is somehow more compatible with war beast psychology than established military doctrines? The answer to that question was currently scratching a 3-meter predator behind what might generously be called ears, while discussing the simulation's tactical challenges with the casual expertise of someone analyzing a particularly interesting puzzle. I think, Dr. Molina said carefully, we may need to reconsider our assumptions about military hierarchy and evolutionary advantages. The various species representatives absorbed this information, with varying degrees of graceful acceptance. The Saurix delegation began questioning whether dominance displays were as universally impressive as they'd assumed. The Veilani flickered through several states of philosophical uncertainty. Even the collective Chittic consciousness seemed to be experiencing something resembling individual doubt. The formal conclusion of the ceremony proceeded with considerably less pomp than its beginning. Zara was officially designated as the war beast's partner, a decision that the creature supported by settling down next to her chair and refusing to acknowledge anyone else's authority in the matter. Well, Zara said, addressing the assembled military leadership with the same casual tone she'd maintained throughout the entire process. I guess we're partners now. She looked down at the massive predator, which was observing the room with the satisfied expression of someone whose judgment had been thoroughly validated. What do you think we should call you? War beast seems a bit formal for everyday use. The creature made a sound that might have been consideration, then settled on what could charitably be described as a purr. Zara nodded, as if this made perfect sense. All right then, Titan it is. The newly christened Titan seemed pleased with this development, further cementing the partnership that had so thoroughly disrupted established protocols. As the ceremony officially concluded and various delegations began filing out with their assumptions thoroughly challenged, Admiral Corvus made a note to review human tactical capabilities more carefully. If one human cadet could adapt this effectively to war-beast partnership, what did that suggest about human potential in broader military contexts? Commander Thylex, meanwhile, was already calculating the diplomatic implications of explaining to the Galactic Defense Consortium why their newest and supposedly least experienced species had just demonstrated superior compatibility with one of the galaxy's most legendary military assets. The Warbeast Titan had made his choice based on instincts honed by millions of years of evolution. Those instincts had looked past all the impressive displays of specialized superiority and recognized something more fundamental: the ability to survive and thrive in chaotic, unpredictable circumstances. As Zara and Titan left the ceremony hall together, the human maintaining her casual commentary while the predator listened with obvious interest, they embodied something that military textbooks hadn't accounted for: the possibility that the galaxy's newest members might not be its weakest link, but rather its most adaptable asset. Behind them, the assembled military leadership began the complex process of revising doctrines, updating protocols, and explaining to their respective governments why everything they thought they knew about military hierarchy might need reconsideration. The Nexus Military Academy had witnessed many selection ceremonies over the years, but none quite like this. As the chrome spires of Corvex Prime caught the light of distant stars, they gleamed with the same bureaucratic optimism as always. The difference was that now, somewhere in those gleaming halls, a human and her warbeast partner were probably discussing more efficient ways to handle future tactical challenges. And if that didn't qualify as trouble for established galactic order, it was certainly a promising start.